Today is free. And in June, our next meeting, we will begin a different kind of ministry. And actually what I'm going to be talking about then is this. Let me see if I can share the screen from the beginning. All right. Can you see that, Joseph? Can you see the screen that says Preaching to Empty Seats?
Yeah, I can. Looks good.
Okay. So what we're going to be doing starting in June is each month I'm going to be taking a different chapter of my book, Preaching to Empty Seats, and I'm going to be using the whole time. I may be using 90 minutes instead of an hour because it's going to take more than an hour for me to thresh this out and then have time for people to ask questions. So the first session in June will be Preaching to Empty Seats, talking about empty preachers. And the premise is that part of the reason why we have empty seats in our church is because we have empty preachers in the pulpit. So that'll be a time, that one session in June, where we'll be talking about what is it that creates empty preachers, what is the phenomenon of empty preachers, what effect does it have on the church, and then of course we'll be giving some suggestions on how preachers can be full. Now this can be for associates, for pastors, even members, because members have something to do with emptying the preachers. So that will be the first focus. And we're encouraging people, pastors, members, and so forth, to gather together in June. I believe it's going to be June the 11th when we have our next and our first session, gather together and to watch that along with us. And then the next month, which will be July, we'll be talking about empty preaching. Now the empty preacher has to do with the personal dynamics or the personal characteristics or the personal condition of the preacher, him or herself. But empty preaching has to do with the way they preach, how they preach, what the aim of their preaching is, what the form of their preaching is, and so on and so forth. So we'll talk about empty preaching and give some tips on how to fill the preaching that will indeed fill the house. Then thirdly, we're going to come back in September, skip August, but come back in September, talking about empty people. And this will give people, pastors, churches, parishioners, an opportunity to gather together key people in their leadership. These are the greeters, the ushers, the deacons, the choir members, people who have leadership in the church, and indeed the members, and talk about the extent to which the people in the church contribute to the empty seats. And that's very powerful because a lot of times we think that it's all the preacher or it's all, the leaders, but just people sitting in the seats have something to do with how the church is full. So I would encourage pastors to make that a time to indicate to key leaders, have them to get on the call so that they can be a part of it as well. That's going to be in September. Then the next month we talk about empty praise. I guess that would be October. The praise, the worship, is a very powerful component of what takes place in a church. And it is one of the major things that draws people and keeps people there. Of course, the preaching is important, but the praise and worship gets people in the mindset, in the attitude, in the frame of mind to actually come in and to stay in. So what is it about the praise that fills the house? And so we'll talk about that. Then next we'll talk about the empty plate. Hallelujah. You got to have resources. You got to have money. You got to have cash in order to make the kingdom go forward in so many ways. And so during that session, we'll be talking about what it is that a church does or can do in order to increase the cash, in order to increase the money, the tithes and the offerings that come into their church. And not only the tithes and offerings, but other streams of income, other streams of resources that come in. It is possible and probably the case that many, if not most of our churches today cannot make it just on tithes and offerings. We need other streams of income. So during that time, we'll talk about how to fill the empty plate. And then next we'll talk about the empty place, which is the facility itself. Your church, in many ways, is the business card of your ministry. And when people look at it, they make a judgment about what's inside before they ever come inside, before they ever even read the sign. Excuse me. They make a judgment about what that church is like. And so we have to talk about what is the physical condition of the building, outside, inside. What does the sign look like? What is the structure of the building? What's the flow? Are there signs inside, and so on and so forth? What's the atmosphere when a person walks into the door? What does it say to them physically? And all of these things too have to do with whether or not people stay or feel comfortable in that space. So we'll talk about the empty place. And then 7, we'll talk about empty programs. Okay, let's say you got great preaching and praise and so on and so forth. The building is nice. You're making plenty of money. But if there's nothing happening in the church that is actually attracting and holding and ministering to the people, then they will not stay. So then we've got to examine the programs, the ministries, the activities that we have for those. Now, each of these sessions, as you can see, will be opportunities for different groups of church members or different groups of people in the ministry to come where their particular group is highlighted. But of course, any and everybody is welcome to enjoy all of them. And these are things that we talk about in the book, but we'll talk about more in depth in these workshops live, and you'll get an opportunity to ask questions about them. And so then number 8 is empty promotion. How are we promoting our ministry? Is it the case that people do not come to our church because they don't know what's there, or they don't know what's going on there? I've been in many churches where I've discovered that there are so many powerful, wonderful, exciting things going on in the church, but we can be around the corner from them and not know that. So much of the advertisement is just done among the people in the church, and people outside the church, next door, down the street, across the street, around the corner, they have no idea what's going on inside that church. So that means that we have to have some kind of plan of promotion to let people know what's going on in our church, and that will invite them and help us to fill the seats. And then finally, empty plans. So we go through the preaching, the preachers, the people, the praise, the plate, the place, the program, the promotion. So now what is our plan? And in this final session, we'll be talking about how to develop a plan that will put all of this stuff into action. It's not going to be helpful. It's not going to make any difference if all we do is read and study and talk about it. We have to develop some plans and plan to plan so that we can bring all of this into fruition. So that is the end goal, that during these workshops and during these webinars, we will invite people from across the country and around the world to participate in these monthly workshops where we hope we will walk them through the process of how to fill these empty seats.